My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We are doing a video interview with Jack Rector, a retired electrical engineer for Rockwell Collins for many years. Jack, tell us what year and when, where you were born.
I was born in Sanger, Texas in 1919. It's a small country town, or was a small country town north of Denton, Texas. And I grew up on a farm. My dad did livestock and farming there.
Did you have any brothers and sisters? No.
I was the oldest of 5 kids. My next in line was 4 years younger than I. And then I had 2 brothers and a sister. And then later on we had another brother who I'm about 12 years older than he is.
Your grandfather, was he a farmer in Texas too?
He was a rancher and a farmer. Family moved to Texas, north of in Denton County, back from my great grandfather moved from Missouri, a town in on the Missouri River, and they moved down there in their early, I think, right after the Civil War in that area.
Mm-hmm. What was your, being that you were the oldest of the children, I imagine you were kind of like a hired hand to your dad. What did you get in your chores? What were you responsible for then?
My chores were plowing in the summertime with a team of mules after I got old enough to do that, and helping milk cows, of course. And that was our farm life in those days, were milking cows, tending to the cattle, and plowing. Took all summer to plow a few acres for a wheat crop in those days.
How many cows did you and your dad milk?
Well, at that time, we were when I was there, we were milking about 12 or 13 cows. Yeah. Might mention that that was during the Depression, and when things got tough, my mother made butter, churned butter, and sold it at the local Denton, one of the department store, or one of the supermarkets there. And I used to deliver the butter, and I was about, I think I was about 12, 13 years old in those days, driving Model T Ford.
Did you say your hometown was in the northern part of Texas?
Yes, it's Sanger is just north of, just south of the line. Oh, it's about 25 miles to the Red River line.
The reason I asked was, was your farm involved in the Dust Bowl days of the 35 and 36?
Yes, it was, although it was different from the West Texas dust. We got a lot of dust, but it wasn't it didn't blow out the areas like it did. We were that far, we were a little further east than that, but it was dry. It was many years that we didn't have much of a crop.
Did you go to country school or in town?
I went town. Little town of Sanger was a little town on the Santa Fe Railroad in the early days, and was developed primarily, I suppose, an agricultural town from for cotton and grains. And early, it was strictly an agricultural town in those days.
So where did young Jack, did you go to college?
Yes, after I graduated from high school, I stayed out of school and worked on the farm for a year, and then I went to Texas A&M in I'd have to get this straight, 1938. I entered Texas A&M, and it was inspiration of a cousin of mine, Bill Rector, who was 4 years older than I, who found a way to work his way through college, and he showed me how to do it. So,
when you were in high school, was that your plan to go to college someday, or
yes.
did he talk you into it?
No, I had become interested in things electrical and mechanical as I was growing up, and so I was decided that I wanted to go to become an electrical engineer, even in high school.
Did you ever build yourself a crystal set?
Oh yes, I built a crystal set, and later, of course, built sets with tubes in them, a vacuum tube.
Did you ever hear about, when you were going to college, did you ever hear about Collins Radio Company building equipment for the Bird Exposition?
No, I couldn't say I did. I used to listen when I was in high school. Built myself some regenerative receivers and listened to the hams, but I cannot honestly say I ever heard of the Collins Company in those days.
Were you into sports? I know football is very popular in Texas, isn't it? Were you in?
Well, I was small for my age, so I became the team manager, as they called him, the guy who carried out water to the guys and helped that way. They called him a manager. That was quite a job for a gopher, wasn't it?
So when you graduated from Texas A&M, what was your next?
What happened there was that since I was working my way through school, I planned to do 4 years, 5 years. Planned to take 5 years. It ended up that I took ROTC, went into the ROTC program, and so at the end of 4 years, I was ready to go in the military as a young second lieutenant. And so I still had some college left, and so I was commissioned without a degree, and then after the war was over, I went back and finished up 4 years later, approximately.
Yeah. Didn't you do a stint in Ames?
Yes, after I was commissioned and went to Reserve Officers Conditioning School, you'd call it. I got a call one morning at Bachelor Officers' Quarters telling me that I was getting ready to leave. I was going to be clearing the post on Monday morning. I asked where I was going, and they said, "You're going to Ames, Iowa." And I said, "What's at Ames, Iowa?" And they said, "There's Iowa State College there, and you're going to be an ROTC instructor." That's how I got to Ames.
What was your duties in the military? What theater was you in? Was you in the European theater or the Pacific?
After finished our tour at Ames, went to Camp Crowder, Missouri, where they sent us to. I was sent to a radio teletype school, and I was in charge of a radio teletype team consisting of about 10 guys. And by this time it was later in the war, and the war in Europe was going real strong. We shipped to the Pacific, and we were shipped to a detachment of 55 officers and about 500 men. We shipped to New Guinea, and we were staging in New Guinea. And as I look back now, what we were really getting ready for was the Battle of Japan, which fortunately didn't happen. We finally moved as far up as the Philippines. By the time we got to the Philippines, it had been cleared, and we were obviously staging for the Battle of Japan. And we were in the Philippines when they dropped the first bomb. We were very thankful about that.
Needless to say, everybody was elated when they heard that. Yeah. And then, did you get to come home shortly after that, or?
Yes, that occurred in August, I believe, and by Christmas, sometime around Christmas time, I came back to, and by that time I had married, and my wife, our first son was living in Fort Dodge, Iowa. I came back to Iowa.
What was his name?
My son John was born, and we then moved quickly from there to back to College Station, Texas, for me to start back to school. And I remember that interesting thing that I keep teasing my wife about is that she was, we met her at Ames, and she was a college student there, and she graduated while I was gone, by the way. And we got to College Station, which is not too far from Houston, as you know. It was in February, and she saw people mowing the lawns and trimming the hedges. She says, "This is not right."
Had you heard of Lyndon Johnson by then?
Yes.
Was he into politics around that period?
Yeah, about the time in the spring of that year, he was running for office, and we heard of his name at that time. Yeah.
So where did you end up getting your first job, Jack?
My first job was with the Oklahoma Gas and Electric, which is right now. I graduated in 1940. I mean, finished college in 1947, and my first job was with the Oklahoma Gas and Electric Company in Enid, Oklahoma. And that lasted about. I worked there about 18 months, and then I got an opportunity to go back to Iowa State College and teach electrical engineering. The GIs were returning from the Army at that time, and they needed a lot of teachers, and they were taking teachers who didn't have an awful lot of experience, and I certainly didn't have, but I got a job. And this gave me the opportunity to not only teach, but to work on my advanced degree, which I finally finished it.
So where did you in Collins Radio make connections?
Oh, that's interesting. After the Korean War, when the Korean War started, there was an opportunity then for engineers to get into defense work, and I ended up with a job at what's now General Dynamics in Fort Worth, and so we moved the family back to Fort Worth, and I was there for about a year, and at that time I saw an ad in one of the electronics magazines that Collins Radio was looking for engineers. And they had also just started a small facility at Redbird Airport in Dallas, near Dallas. And,
Collins did?
Yeah. I went over there and interviewed, and while that was not complete at that time, I finally ended up interviewing in Cedar Rapids, and Glenn Johnson got me an appointment with the engineers, and Ed Fritzy and Clem Arnold were responsible for hiring me. And I got a job there, and moved.
What year was that, Jack?
We moved back to Cedar Rapids in 1952, August 52. Just in time for our last child, Barbara, to be born after we were here for about a month. And it was a close call.
You would have been about 33 years old at that time.
Let's see. I was there, 1952. I got to be 33. I was 22 when we moved. Yeah.
You remember your clock number?
No, I don't. I've got the badge in there, but I don't remember that. It was pretty high.
What was your first assignment they'd given you?
My first assignment had done work on simulators at General Dynamics, and my first job was working up a simulator to simulate the relationship between the equipment that we were building here, which was a flight system and autopilot works, and I was did the simulator work to tie the instrumentation that we were building to simulate the dynamics of an airplane.
What was your starting wage?
$500 a month.
In what
My
building?
starting wage that was at Collins. My starting wage at Oklahoma Gas and Electric was $200 a month, $200.50 a month. And my wife did a great job of managing our budget to live on that.
And you thought you were probably living pretty good at that time,
Yeah,
too.
that's
What building did you start working in? Was it in the main plant across the street?
main across the street from here, except it was in the Butler buildings. And the Butler buildings at that time were not air conditioned. They had fans blowing close away, and it was August. It was pretty warm at that time. And shortly after that, though, when our new plant, our new engineering building was built north of.
And did you utilize the cafeteria? Did you eat at the cafeteria then?
Oh yes, that was great. I could come to work and we could go over and have coffee and even eat breakfast if we had skipped breakfast at home.
There was a large fire that destroyed one of the Butler buildings. Was that the one you worked in, or?
I don't remember that, and that might have been before or after. I don't remember that fire.
When you first started out as an electrical engineer, was there any women engineers at that time in the electrical field?
Not a one, not that I know of. But later on, I think it was maybe a couple of years later, I hired a woman engineer. But at that time, we didn't have any.
At that time when you worked there, the model shop was in the main plant, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
Drafting was perhaps way up in the front end on the 35th Street side of the plant, the drafting
Yes,
department?
although we had some, yes, I believe it was. The drafting was in the main plant. And
When
our
you,
engineers, our mechanical engineers did most of our drawings and put our sketches together, and then they were turned over to our drafting.
in 52, was there a lot of hiring of engineers being done at that time?
Not a great deal. There was some, but it was not to the extent it was later on. When we really started rolling.
Where did you live when you first come to Cedar Rapids?
Lived up on 30th Street, which is less than a mile from here.
Was there-
30th Street,
Yeah.
which is almost due between here and Cedar Point Road, or an Oakland Road.
Did you walk to work then?
Yeah, I worked to walk to work. That was great. I thought that was the greatest thing you ever saw. You could walk to work.
Kept you in shape. Was housing hard to come by in that time?
Not too bad, although we bought a place and right away, but it was. I guess I can't remember how the situation was.
Okay, so after your first assignment on the analog simulator, what was your next project?
My next project assignment was to become project engineer of our flight control system, our automatic flight control system. And this item here, represents when we finally got to the point of having a product. This was our first publication called this. At that time was CDS, and I don't know if you can read it, but it's
Yeah,
the
just
automatic
hold
flight
it.
control consisted of the automatic pilot, and combining, including the flight director system. And you remember you interviewed some of the pilots who used that.
What could the customer expect from this equipment?
Well, it was,
In layman's terms, what would this do for the
it was
pilots?
the automatic pilot was it could be used in cruise mode for relief of the pilot while he's flying, and take off some of the workload. And then it was important in making an instrument landing approach where he could use the automatic pilot and the flight director and make an approach in bad weather.
Who was Collins competing with at this time for this equipment then?
The two big suppliers at that time were, well, there were about three, but the big ones was Sperry and Bendix were the two, which now if you look, what's happened in the meantime is that Sperry has become part of Honeywell, and Bendix has also become part of Honeywell. They've been combined to be one company.
The controls for this equipment here, were they, did they have to be built in clean rooms or?
The instruments themselves were these are kind of the early instruments that we had in those days. I don't know if you can see that or not. They eventually became a part of the clean room operation. Now the black boxes and the servos were not needed to be in that. So I guess one significant thing I would say that was different about was a new experience for all of us is that this was a time when autopilots had developed a name for being very unreliable, and the pilots and the ones that had been installed in airliners were turned off. They weren't using them. So our management, probably from Mr. Collins on down, said we've got to get rid of the vacuum tubes in these things because they're unreliable in the way they're being used. And so our job was to get rid of the vacuum tubes. And it was just before transistors were considered suitable for that kind of application because of the, so we developed a group of magnetic amplifiers for this system and applied these. That was a new experience for us. And we first tried to get magnetic amplifiers developed from outside sources, and that failed to materialize. So we finally ended up doing our own development, which was a bit of technology that was new for us and the company as well as a whole.
This magnetic amplifier, was this a small module by itself that took the place of tubes?
Yes, that's right. And we ended up building, and I don't know if we probably don't have any examples of that in this particular brochure, but yes, we developed a set of modules, and then we used these modules over and over again to accomplish the job. We had I think in the days it was an A amplifier and a B amplifier and a C amplifier, and these were become building blocks for the autopilot system.
And these were actually used prior to the transistor?
Yes, they were used prior to the transistor, and as a matter of fact, toward the latter part of our development program in this one, we were able to use a few transistors in the final stages of the device. And it took us about a year and a half or 2 years before development cycles were longer then than they are now.
Then when the transistor did come on the scene, did that revolutionize the whole concept of...
Yes, it did. Magnetic amplifiers were a wonderful thing in those days, and we look back and brag at ourselves how great they were, and now we were talking to one of our engineers, and he said, but Jack, nobody cares anymore. And that's typical of a lot of our developments, is that once you move on, nobody cares about what you did before. Yeah, and so when we moved on to later systems, like we did for the 1011 airplane, we were using all transistors by that time.
In order to have your equipment certified, what had to take place?
Well, in this case, in the case of our
Autopilots
were applied primarily for the executive market, executive airplane market, and corporate jets, and corporate airplanes, and then airlines. In the airlines cases, civil systems, and we had to run a certification test on these, and these tests were certified by ourselves, and but they were defined. We defined the test and ran them and certified that they were okay.
What type of plane did you use to certify it on?
Well, our first certification was actually in our Beach D-18 or E-18, and then
was that one of the Collins
yeah,
planes?
one of the Collins planes, and then our first installation was in a DC-3, owned by one of the corporations. I think maybe like Gamble at that time, Gamble Stores or one of those. I don't remember now for sure what. But it was a DC-3, and then later we got our autopilots installed in most of those planes in those days were surplus airplanes, as you know. And then finally the jets came along, and our first installation was in a Dassault airplane. It was a jet airplane.
Were you into the airline markets yet, or the government market yet, or?
Well, it's a strange thing happened there in terms of the market. The flight director, which was the front end of the autopilot, was actually the first was where we had some of our major successes, and the instruments that we developed for the flight directors were first sold to Eastern Airlines, and in the I believe it was the 707, and then later they went into other airplanes. Finally, when the 727 came along, and we had a new set of instruments for that, which was called the FD-108 and 109, that was a big success. And those were instruments in which the pilots used to fly and did not tie into the autopilots at that time. And so they were strictly did their approach landing systems manually. And then finally, our first autopilot installation was in a turboprop airplane from Air Canada, and that was I'm trying to remember the type number of that now, but it was Vickers Viscount that was the airplane.
All of this installation of this equipment, was this done out at the Collins hangar by Collins personnel? And
No, our prototypes were done that way. Then finally, when we actually did the installations, and they went to modification centers, some of which were done in Dallas or in Madison Airport when they had that done. Mm-hmm. In the case of the Canadian installation, we did our prototype work in Canada, and then they did their installations there.
When in testing the prototypes, did the engineers go along with the?
Yes.
Go along with the plane?
Engineers were part of the program.
Were you able to go with them?
A lot of flight testing, and some of them
were. What did kind of like around the around Cedar Rapids or long flights? Or?
It did. That's interesting. You bring up an interesting point. In the early days, when we were doing flight director work and autopilot work, making approaches, the Cedar Rapids did not have an ILS facility at that time, so we'd have to go down to Rock Island or Des Moines or other places to do our flight testing to see if we were really doing the right thing, you know. And then, but then one day they got the ILS system here, and we could do our flight testing here.
Do you remember any of the Collins pilots that used to fly the planes?
Oh yes, Clayton Lander was one of which you've already interviewed. Clayton Lander, He's in the book. Rolf Wallen, and Dick Phelps, later Bill Stevens, and so they were great guys to work with.
Wasn't it about this time that she left Collins and went to?
Right after, yes, in 1957, I was gone for a year when we thought family thought we would like to be out in the Denver area with my wife's relatives, sister, and so we went out there for a year, and the job that I had there was not nearly as satisfying. So Ed Pritzy allowed me to come back, and I came back and took over a department where we developed the autopilot. We're still working on the same thing.
Did he let you retain your seniority when you with the company when?
I did. I broke never was able to bridge the pension system, but I was very happy to get back anyway.
So when you come back, now we're talking about the FD 108 and 109.
Yes, that's when those got developed after I got back.
And what type of product was this? Was these another advanced flight director?
Yes, it was more advanced than over the one I showed here, and then we were also working on more advanced autopilots as well.
Mm-hmm. How about the automatic flight control system along with the Category 3? What did that allow the pilot to do?
Well, yes, that was where we really were working on automatic landing systems, and that is more in line along with the 1011 system here, as you see here. And that was our major breakthrough because up to this point in time, there was not a satisfactory automatic landing system in this country. Most of the development had been done in England as far as doing all-weather landing systems. Because of the safety aspect of a system in a landing situation is quite critical. And in fact, we had to end up with a built-in redundancy. We ended up actually with what was called a triplex system, where we had actually basically three autopilots following the landing, and with a comparator system such that if there was a failure of any one system, the other two would decide who was right and carry on. So we call that a fail-active automatic landing system.
When this system was perfected, then this would allow the pilot to land in any type of weather, as far as visibility is concerned.
As specified by the categories of category. They had categories 2, category 3, 3A, and so forth. Category 2 would allow you to go down to a certain level, and then category 3 would let you go ahead and land in bad weather, and then you also category 3A would get you out to where you could see a ways, and then category 3B was all the way to roll out. And our system was designed to carry us down to that. Again, depending on what facilities the airport had, we had to have certified system for that. In other words, the airports had to be equipped for that kind of equipment.
And this has been perfected today, and this allows pilots to take off and land in just about
Yes, I don't think it's gone as far as fast as for example, the airlines most of the airlines are able to do this in certain airplanes. It still has not been in the business end of the corporate aviation hasn't gone that far yet. And the new thing that's coming on, as I understand it, is that eventually we will be using GPS to complement the systems, and that'll take us. That's being worked on now as part of the flight system. So you're about to get me into questions which I'm not really current.
Okay. When you come back from Honeywell, did you retain your job as project engineer?
Well, when I left, I was a man, what they call a group head, and I came back in that same capacity, and then took over as a department later on.
How many hours did you put in on a week average?
Oh my! I guess in the early days we had. I suppose we put in as many as sometimes 60, 70, 80 hours, depending on, what the urgency of the program was and so forth. But we put in a lot of hours.
Did you ever get burned out?
I wouldn't say burned out. We
stressed out.
We got tired. And when we'd have times like certification programs and so forth. Cost quite a bit of work, but in those days when we were younger, we were very interested in making sure that what we were working on worked, and we just it was a work ethic that I think was unusual, probably unusual for this country. I think Cedar Rapids had a work ethic. The engineers at Cedar Rapids. Worked many hours more than you would find in other places, from my experience.
Did you take advantage of your vacations? Did you use your vacations that you accumulated?
Yes, I'd say in general we did. Yeah, we accumulated extra hours over the time. But
did you take your family on trips or?
Yes, we went on trips. Early days we went on camping trips and that sort of thing. Yeah. But we didn't travel near to the extent that families do today, where they take trips to Europe and Mexico and various places.
Do you remember the vacation contest that Collins Radio used to have, that when you were on vacation, they would have a contest to see who would run across
Yes.
a fellow employee the furthest away from Cedar
That's right. I
Rapids.
remember that. I don't think I won any of those contests.
Did you ever have the opportunity to work with Art Collins?
Some, not to the extent that is defined in Ben Stearns' new book, to that extent, but on a few occasions he would come out and go on some of our flight tests with us and comment on what he saw and so forth. In general, he was very gentlemanly about it, and but it wasn't very often, because his primary interest in those days were other things, and as long as he thought we were handling this part of it all right, he let us be.
Was he the type of person that would give you praise if praise was warranted, or he just expected it of you?
I guess it would be I guess we considered it praise if he didn't find something wrong, if he didn't use the diagonal flowers.
Did you know Dr. Alexander Lippisch?
Yes, I met him on a number of occasions, and he was a very delightful person to talk with. Yes, he was very interesting. And,
did you find when you had a product, put it into production, and it finally hit the market, did you find it ever being outdated by the time it hit the market? Did technology advance so much that...
Let me think about that. This equipment that we had at that time was it took quite a while for it to change, and part of the reason is it took a long time for airplanes to for them to modify their airplanes such that they could do that. So unlike the consumer market, there were a lot of things that had to take place in order for you to. You want to stop that for a minute?
Altogether. About this time period, the digital control, flight control system come on board?
Yes, digital started coming into our work in terms of switch controls and that sort of thing, and we were starting to do digital work towards the end of my working as an engineer. We, for example, we developed one of the first digitally controlled horizontal course indicator, horizontal situation indicator, I guess HSI, as the military finally called it. And we developed that for the F-15. And it was electromechanical system, but tied into the digital control system for the airplane. They had F-15 was one of the first airplanes that had what they called a digital bus, in which signals would run around the airplane and go to control digitally.
And then the controls went from the mechanical clockwork type control to the liquid crystal displays.
Yes, later on the liquid crystal display came into play, and by this time I was ended up my career shifted to where I went into marketing for a few years, and we marketed we were working on some of the early digitally radio control systems, control of the radios with the digital tuning and that sort of thing came into play.
You had mentioned way up front that Ed Fritzy was involved with bringing you on board at Collins. Mm-hmm. You and him were close friends, weren't you, for years?
We were very close friends, yeah.
And was he killed in an auto accident?
He was killed in an automobile accident in about 1970, as I recall. And I've missed him all the time, and every once in a while I even have a dream that Ed Fritzy's back working.
In '76, you said you transferred to England. That did it?
Yes, yeah, that's right. There I was, by this time I was working for our government avionics division, and my job was to try to help promote our equipment and that we were developing, such as TACAN and other systems and we were working at that time on the GPS was under development. So I was marketing for our division in Europe, and my beat was the Scandinavian countries, all of Europe and Germany.
Did you live in England?
Lived in England.
Did your family move with you?
Well, our kids were all left home by that time. My wife.
Oh, they had.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, so,
did you enjoy 2 years in England?
Yeah, it was interesting. It had its trials and its
tribulations.
Tribulations, but it was a cultural shock to some extent, getting used to the way that other countries lived and so forth. But on the other hand, we had quite a few Americans that worked for the company that allowed us to do our socializing, and then we met some interesting British people as well.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting experience.
What was the highest position you reached at Collins Radio? Well, Rockwell Collins.
Well, I was my job was director of flight control, system engineering, and at that time I guess we had about 100 people, 100 engineers working for us.
Back in the 70s, Collins had a downturn, 69, 70 time frame. Was you able to maintain your job during that time?
I maintained my job, but we lost a lot of our people, and we had to downsize. I became from a director to a manager, I guess, as part of our downsizing operation.
When Rockwell took over this operation, do you feel that was a great asset?
I personally think it was a great thing. I think it saved a lot of jobs. I think it saved a lot of things that the company was trying to do. And I know it was hard on Mr. Collins because it changed his role in the company. But from a standpoint of the company, I guess I think Rockwell did us a favor.
Yeah. It probably saved the reputation of Collins Radio.
I think it did. Yes, I think it did, because I don't know what would have happened if a different kind of company had come in. No telling what would have happened. Mm-hmm. We've seen that happen in other companies who've come into our area and taken over companies, and some of them have survived, and others doors have been closed.
So, when you come back to Cedar Rapids from England, what did you do?
I stayed in marketing and I only stayed in marketing. I retired within about a year after I came back.
Was this you were in marketing for GPS then?
Yes, I went into GPS marketing and went around the country trying to determine where GPS would be going in that time, and I had no idea the way it was going.
You had no idea, did you?
No, it was absolutely fantastic.
How long was the GPS in the design phase, approximately?
I think it started in, I'd have to say that about 1976. And other people know more about this than I do, but in the early 70s, 75, 76, we got our first job, our first contract. I was not involved in it. Our first contract came in about that time. And a fellow who would know you should ask about it is Merle Ludwig, and he can tell you all about how we got into that contract. What
did the customer expect from GPS? What did he want originally?
He wanted, from our standpoint, our job was to build the user equipment, the people who would be in the field, in the Navy, in the Air Force, all the users. And what they wanted to be able to position themselves within about 3 meters, as I recall, and anywhere in the world. That's what was fantastic about that system, that you could find where you are within. And that was the objective. And our first job was, the company's first job was to develop user. Well, I say finally they were able to be able to bid and become a developer for the user equipment. When I say user equipment, the people who use it, and of course the GPS system involved the satellites and all that sort of thing, which was not done here, but done by other people.
This is done through a series of satellites.
24 satellites circulating.
But when they first started, they probably didn't have 24
no,
satellites.
they only had 3 or 4, and so part of the development process had to be, and they had to do a lot of simulation on the satellites, build equipment that would simulate them. And prove that they were working. And then when they finally got some equipment going, they had to wait for the satellites to come over certain times of the day so they could check them out.
You had mentioned the fact they tried to meet the parameter of 10 meters or 3 meters. Did you say?
I think it was about 3 meters.
3 meters. And what is it today? Do you know the accuracy of it?
Well, they're actually
plus or minus.
They're actually depending on the accuracy is such that they can use them for surveying processes and surveying instruments. Actually, surveying. If you want to do it, if you had a lot you want to survey, the surveyor goes out and finds the equipment and with one or two guys can do what it used to take a whole surveying crew to do. But from a military standpoint and so forth, they're getting down to where you're seeing what's happening and where they're being able to put missiles into windows and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And fishermen sitting out in their boats with a handheld GPS.
That's right.
Or a hunter out in the woods with a handheld GPS.
Yeah.
In your wildest dreams, did any of the engineers envision
That,
the uses of GPS?
and I don't believe they did. I don't believe I did, because we didn't understand how fast the technology would allow us to do that. I know I used to wonder how you would ever be able to put all this stuff in a light airplane, let alone I could see it being used for a bomber or something like that. And if you would look at some of the big boxes that our first user equipment consisted of, they were big, huge boxes. And the first man pack was a thing that, it looked like it was, it was heavy. And so that's really changed.
Now the commercial version can be held in the palm of your hand.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I think you're going to see pretty soon that every individual soldier will know where he is, and he'll have communications back to his company organizations, and they'll be able to spot every individual, know exactly where he is, and he'll be able to get instructions directly by wireless communication. It's coming.
Was GPS, was this an invention of someone or a group of people from Collins, Rockwell Collins, or is this?
No, it was actually started as a Navy program, and gradually grew from Navy and Air Force and so forth. Other people started working on it, but it started out primarily as a government-sponsored operation. And the people that developed this were very intelligent people.
Could you say Rockwell Collins, though, was on the cutting edge? They come up with the first, or weren't they?
They came up with some of the early concepts of how to implement it. I'd say their forte was in the implementation of the system. But the system concept, the architecture and all that was done by a lot of people. A lot of studies and universities, and a lot of people had a lot of hand in that. And that's a whole story in itself, and beyond my scope of understanding.
What would you say your most enjoyable years at Collins were? What time
I would
frame?
say my first 3-4 years here were really delightful. And I would say, that was most fun. That was when I should have had to pay to work here.
Yeah. and probably at the time when you wasn't sure what you should worry about yet.
Yeah.
Once you found out what you should worry about.
When I became a supervisor and a manager, it was not as much fun. It might have been more satisfaction, but it wasn't as much fun.
Did you like to manage people, or did you find that something you wished you didn't have to do?
No, I enjoyed it, but it was a different. I enjoyed it, and felt I got satisfaction out of being able to help people and to help shape their career and that sort of thing. But it was a different mode that I was operating in, a different mode than when I was trying to design and do analysis and complicated stuff that's involved in engineering.
Comparing the day that you walked into Collins Radio and if you had the opportunity to go back in now, what do you suppose some of the biggest difference you should see in people and in personnel?
That's an interesting question.
I'm sure their work habits are quite different.
Yeah, well, I guess the kids coming out of school today are very, very smart, very intelligent, and they catch on quickly. And from what I've seen, and it's just a different, level of smartness, I guess you'd say. And so they start at a higher level than I did. They, from a standpoint of the technology that they use, and I'm not sure they know any more mathematics or physics than I did when I got out. But they have been able to skip some of the fundamentals that we used to have to concern ourselves with. And I don't understand yet how that's all going to happen. How you build, how the technology moves, where we can do things that we didn't dream we could do. But the young ones are dreamers, and they know how to do that.
Do you think the young generation, by using all the electronic gadgets and the toys and the video games, do you think that helps them in designing, solving, thinking?
I think it probably does. I think if I've been doing some volunteer work with some kids at the Four Oaks, and I just don't know. I don't know how that's working, but my feeling is that I know a lot of people think they should not have access to some of these technologies and toys until they learn some of the fundamentals. But I guess I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how best that should work. But I feel like that the more they can get their hands on things, and
more they're exposed to.
More they're exposed to.
What year did you retire, Jack?
1982.
And then what did you do after that?
I came back and did some marketing analysis for Rockwell Collins, and then I also taught at over at Iowa State in electrical engineering for a couple of years, and then spent some time down at the university. I spent 1 year down at the university teaching.
You had mentioned that when you graduated from A&M and then started Collins Radio, there wasn't any other electrical engineers. When you went back to teach at the University of Iowa, was there a lot of women in the electrical engineering classes?
Yes, there were quite a few by that time.
And quite sharp.
Yeah, they're sharp gals. Yeah.
Did you notice any difference compared when you were a student or students at your time and the students nowadays, their work habits, study habits?
That's hard for me to say. I guess I don't know. I would say there seemed to be, to me, and of course it's because I'm the relationship, being a teacher, an instructor versus being a student, I saw a greater interest on their part to get a good grade there seemed to be a competitive pressure to get as high a grade as they possibly could, any way they could get it. And
Very serious about it.
very serious about it, yes. And that, to me, was a difference that I realized when I was a student. Of course, I was striving to get a good grade too, but I didn't feel the pressure to get a high grade as it was for me just to get through, you know. I wanted to get a good grade so I could pass the course, basically.
Would you say that's probably due to a more competitive world now
I would think so.
compared to your day when a good job was good enough?
Well, yeah, I think that's right.
When you went to college, did you go to spring breaks?
Never heard of them. Never heard of them.
Did you do any traveling? What's your hobbies after you retired? Or
Oh, we've done quite a bit of traveling.
Yeah.
Yes, we've gone to Europe several times. We've gone to a trip to Russia. We've gone to, I guess, we traveled mostly in Europe. We have not done much. We've gone to Hawaii quite a few times, but we haven't traveled in the Far East.
what's your favorite country that you visited? Most interesting?
I like Germany, and we're just planning to do a Scandinavian trip. We haven't done that yet. We're doing that shortly. But Germany and Switzerland and those countries I like.
Do you have any hobbies, Jack?
Do I have any hobbies? Yes, I play around with the computers quite a bit. That's probably my greatest hobby.
Good.
I am a ham. I'm trying to get on the air, but I haven't gotten very far yet.
Were you a ham throughout your early
no,
years?
No, I didn't get a ham license until about 4 years ago. And so I haven't pursued that as much as I had intended to.
Is there still a strong interest in amateur radio as there was, say, 25 years ago? Is it still there?
I don't know. There's still a very strong ham community here. We have a ham club in the Collins. Has a ham club. And those guys it's changed an awful lot. The technology has moved it such that they do different things with the ham stuff that they did. But I don't know how to compare that.
Up to a few years back, Collins over here on the 35th Street plant on the 32nd Street side had the large antenna, and they had a ham or amateur radio room in one of the Butler buildings.
Still have
Do you know they still have? Do you ever get to utilize that?
I haven't been over there yet to use it, but I intend to. And there also is one on the other, up in the other buildings now too. They had a fire, you know.
No, I didn't know that.
They had a fire, and they're trying to rebuild that. They
Over
had a
at
fire
the
in the radio area, in the ham area.
At the 35th Street,
No,
or
it's,
over on the other 120?
And they're still in the process of trying to get that put back together.
Jack, tell us a little about your family. Did you marry an Iowa girl?
Yes, I met Alice in Ames, and she was a student while I was still teaching there as an ROTC instructor, and we were married about a year later.
Was she from Ames?
She grew up in northern Iowa near Fort Dodge, a little town called, she went to high school in Corwith, and she was near Pocahontas. She was near Pocahontas County.
And how many children did you rear?
We have 4 children, and our oldest is John, who lives in Iowa City and works at the post office. our number 2 is Rex, who is a CPA for the government in Fort Worth, Texas, and lives in Arlington. Our son Ed is the only engineer in the family, is a highway engineer, and for the state of New Mexico, and lives in Santa Fe. And our daughter Barbara is married and lives in, and she's a physical education graduate from Iowa State and is now a physical therapist. And her husband Terry works for Hewlett Packard. He's Hewlett Packard marketing manager.
Mm-hmm. How many grandchildren?
We have 5 grandchildren.
Yeah.
3. Barbara has 2, and Ed has 3. Mm-hmm. And this is the family here. Our last picture taken during our graduation of our
granddaughter
Creela, who is now, by the way, a Drake student. And our oldest grandson is Kyle, and he's graduating from Cornell College this spring. Mm-hmm. So we're fortunate to have 2 of our grandkids back in Iowa. So what goes around comes around.
They keep in contact with Grandpa via email. And
yes, we keep in contact that way all the time.
Do you ever get back home to Texas?
Yes, quite a bit. My mother passed away a few years ago, and we still have some of her estates there, and so I have a sister and 2 brothers that live in Texas.
Is the home place still there?
The home place is still there, and it's not occupied at the moment. It's being leased out, but
none of the family chose to follow the tradition that you did?
No, all the family ended up being teachers, or my brother, my sister, and one of my brothers are teachers, retired teachers now, and my youngest brother is an engineer. He's still working some, although he's retired from his original company. But, so we have close family ties with. Just talked to my brother last night for about an hour.
You spent your entire working years designing and helping to design controls to control flight. Mm-hmm. Next year, we're going to be celebrating the 100th anniversary of flight. What do you envision 50 years down the road as far as what flight and the control of flight will be like? Do you ever think about it?
Well, I think that we'll still have people that want to fly airplanes, and they'll be able to fly them with a lot more control capability than they have now. And I'm sure there will be much more electronics involved in airplane usage and design. And if you think about the individual pilot flying sort of thing, if you think of aviation as a whole, we're just now seeing what's happening in the military, where they're using so-called spy planes to go out and look. That, to me, is the way it's going. We're going to see more and more use of pilotless airplanes. And by the way, even while I was still in marketing, they were starting to talk about that. The government was starting to do some planning on that. And I think that you'll see the day when a fighter airplane will be a pilotless airplane. And we'll save lives that way.
The news media and anything people read, they only have a small idea of what is actually out there. Do you feel that there is a lot of things the government has in mind, or there's things the engineering people are working on that the general public has no idea?
Well, I think that's true. I'm sure that's true, and much of it, of course, is classified. And then, but on the other hand, if you see where it's going, communication is going to be the key And of course, a company like Collins fits in a very good position along that line. And there's going to be more and more need for wireless communication. And we have some really talented people in this town, this city, that really know what's going on. And after we get over, I'll give you some names that you can have some more people you can interview.
Jack, if you had your life to live over again, would you have done anything different? Or is there anything that you did not accomplish that you wished you could have?
Oh, there's a lot of things I would like to accomplish. I'm very happy with what I've done, the way I went with my engineer. There's many mistakes I made and a lot of things I do differently. But it's been fun.
Did you ever have a desire to learn how to fly, be a pilot?
Well, I did finally.
Oh, you did?
I finally became a pilot after I was 50 years old. And I didn't, just before I went to England, I had finished, got my pilot's license, and I was doing some flying. I never got to the point where I was really comfortable, really go all out for flying, but I did enjoy the learning to fly. And my instructor was a pilot, a guy by the name of Dave Lammers, who you may have interviewed. He'd be a good one to interview. He was an engineer at work for me, but his avocation was a pilot, and he finally built his own airplane. And so Dave took me and taught me how to fly, and that was the most part funny, learning to fly. In other words, I'd been all this time building gadgets to fly and learning what airplanes like, but I'd never really understood the responsibilities of a pilot and what he had to contend with and what he needed to contend with, particularly from a safety standpoint. And that's what the routines that pilots learn for safety is very important.
When you think back now, do you think that would have been an asset to you if you had learned how to fly a plane or had been a pilot before you went into your engineering career?
Yeah, I think it would have helped. I think it would have helped primarily in terms of, yes, it would have helped. I think the thing that going on with the History Center and the work that you fellows are doing is really a real contribution to the community. I want to compliment you for that, as bad as this thing, as my presentation will turn out to be.
Well, thank you very much, Jack. And Jack, unless you have something else to add, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.
I'd just like to say that even though I couldn't get my wife to be on camera, she has played a very important part of my life and has been a very strong supporter of my career.
That's nice. Thank you.